Well, good morning, Southeast Arkansas. It is time for our morning devotional. Before we begin, look, I want to recap something I said yesterday. It's just about a week before I leave to head out with the MacMed mission team to set up a medical clinic in Uganda. So I just ask you to keep me in your prayers for that. And I even ask you that if you have any questions about what we do with MacMed and what our purpose is, you can feel free to message me right here on Facebook or wherever you happen to encounter this video, and I'd love to talk to you about that. Our morning devotional this morning, though, is entitled Thankful for You. And our devotional verse is 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 3. We ought always to give thanks to God for you, brothers, as is right, because your faith is growing abundantly, and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. The world is an extremely competitive place. People love to argue, they love to fight, they love to prove that they're better than somebody else. And we love to begrudge other people their successes. We learn to be competitive from a very early age. Have you ever been in a family where you play board games? Even in that blessed family event, it often turns into competition and often has very heated results. Have you seen a group of men hanging around together lately? We men will compete about everything. The size of our trucks, how many fish we caught, how big the fish were that we caught. We will argue about anything. Over the years, I've engaged in some door-knocking campaigns with various fellow church members. And one thing we've always been very careful to do when we encounter someone who's a member or attends another church is to be very clear with them. We're not there attempting to, as they say, poach them or to get them to leave their church and come to our church. The question is, why do we even feel compelled to cover that territory? Well, I'll tell you why. Churches and their members and their pastors can be very competitive with one another, and sometimes that competition can lead to hard feelings. I hope that we all know that this should not be so in our churches, and it should not be so among our churches. If any pastor or church member begrudges the success that the Lord gives another pastor or church member, they're simply serving for the wrong reasons. They're serving for the accolades of the world, not for the furtherance of the kingdom. There are some folks that they are so convinced that they're going to have too many crowns in heaven to even hold on to when they meet Jesus. When in fact, what they're going to get from Jesus instead of a bunch of crowns is what in the world were you thinking? It was not uncommon in Paul's letters for him to be very generous with praise to the churches he wrote to. He was also very clear about things they needed to fix, but he was an encourager and he was generous when he issued praise. Paul said good things very often. And I'll just tell you, not every missionary who's planted a church would be that way. Some might wonder why the church seemed to be thriving so well without them and subsequently hold it against them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody complain about the frequency with which some person or another sings special music in church, yet that person is never seen to be doing it themselves. It's even worse, and it's sad, if the person in question is not the greatest singer. If the criticism often flows freely. And all I have to say to that, you can get up there and sing badly anytime you want to, because clearly your voice works just fine, as evidenced by the level of your complaining. We hold others' success against them, even when we have no interest whatsoever in doing the thing that they do. Friends, we need to be like Paul. Nobody rejoiced as hard as Paul when other people in other churches had success. We should drop our petty contests and rejoice in our commonly met objective, which was the spread of the gospel and the furtherance of the kingdom of God. Have a blessed day in the Lord, my friends.